Okay.
So good morning. Are we going to get started? Should I get started?
Please do.
Great. Hi, I'm Tracy, and this is Emily. How many of you were in worship already? Just a couple of you. So I'm going to talk a bit about this in the worship service, in the sermon. But we're delighted to be with you, especially delighted to not be in Cleveland, Ohio this morning, where we're having a blizzard, I understand. So it's been 2 years since I was diagnosed with early stage dementia. And we're here traveling around the world, really, speaking in churches and synagogues, in retirement communities, in hospitals and medical schools and universities about dementia, from what I call the inside out and Emily calls the upside down. And what we're going to talk about this morning is a little bit about what it's like to live with dementia, both as a person with it and as somebody who is a spouse. And we'll talk for maybe 20-30 minutes and then take your questions and enter into conversation with you. Those postcards are so that you can follow a blog that we have out in the web and see what we're up to and tell your friends about it. So how many of you know anybody living with dementia? Anybody here struggling with dementia that wants to say that out loud? Okay. So I was diagnosed about 2 years ago, and I had tried to ignore the increasingly obvious signs and symptoms. And I kept thinking this was stress, that it was normal aging, or that I was one of the worried well. But one day in the spring of 2016, shortly before my 62nd birthday, I looked in the mirror and I did not recognize my own face. I was in a public restroom. I looked around wondering who that cute woman was, only to realize there was nobody else in the restroom but me. And that disconcerting episode, on top of a lot of other things that had been going on, really galvanized me into making an appointment with the leading neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic. And after 6 months of tests and exams that included neurological testing and MRIs and a spinal tap and these god-awful tests called the neuropsych tests. They're 5 hours of kind of helping you to see what's going on cognitively with you. And some speech therapy and some occupational therapy. After all of this, on election day 2016, bad day for us. I heard the words, Tracy, you have early stage dementia, and it's probably frontotemporal degeneration. FTD, as it's known, is a rare form of dementia that has no cure and at the present limited treatments. And it causes a gradual but progressive decline in behavior, language, executive function, that's the ability to make decisions and organize, and movement. Some of the symptoms of MS, for instance, or Lewy body, those things are also present. And Parkinson's are present in FTD, but it usually leaves you with your long-term memory intact. You look at a scan of my brain, the deterioration is in the frontotemporal lobes and the hippocampus, which is where your long-term memories are stored. Mine is at the top level of where it can be. Because it's so less common and less understood, FTD generally is often misdiagnosed, or it takes a really long time to diagnose. It affects people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and there's an average life expectancy after diagnosis of about 7 to 13 years. Dementia is in my DNA. I don't know about any of you, but I can tell you that my mother, my maternal grandfather, and a couple of my aunts all died with it. I watched my mother and many others hide their dementia, that you have as well, as if it's something to be ashamed of or embarrassed about, as if we don't say it out loud, it might not be true, right? And it's almost as if it's a weakness or a punishment or, God forbid, a sin. If only she had eaten less red meat and more dark green leafy vegetables, right? If only he had done the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning, especially on Saturdays. If only she had meditated or done yoga consistently. That list goes on and on. I liken dementia to cancer in the 1960s or AIDS in the 1980s. That it's this incurable disease that we don't really understand, and it's spoken of in hushed voices. I refuse to live with dementia on those terms. So if you take away nothing of what either of us say to you today, I hope you will take this away. Denial is not useful. It doesn't make it go away. It doesn't make it not be real. Honesty is important. It's important for detection and diagnosis and for managing the disease. Early detection and early diagnosis, which is what I've had, can result in a longer and higher quality of life, and transparency makes life easier for everybody involved, especially those who love you the most. An early diagnosis allowed me to exit work gracefully on my terms. A lot of people get fired before their disease is diagnosed. It allowed us to put our affairs in order, to make plans for the future, and to try to imagine how we might experience a high quality of life as my dementia progresses. An early diagnosis has also given me the opportunity to do what I love to do and to spend time with those whom I love. Honesty has afforded me the incentive and the physical ability and still the cognitive ability to be intentional about self-care in some very specific ways. It's not rocket science, but it's basically what's good for the heart is good for the brain living. And to explore ways to manage and perhaps even slow or maybe reverse the progress of the disease. And transparency has encouraged me to make sense of dementia and to attempt to destigmatize it. I was a pastor for over 30 years who could see you twice a year, Christmas and Easter, and address you by name, remember to ask about your job search or inquire about your mother's health or your new puppy. And now I might not recognize your face, and I probably will not remember your name. I was an executive who now finds it difficult to plan and organize and manage projects. I'm a writer and a public speaker who often can't find the words or make complete sentences, and I seem to have a daily quota for conversation. I'm a photographer who can no longer manage my camera settings. I'm a golfer who can't recall where my ball just landed. And I'm a sailor who can't often remember my knots. I'm a cyclist who regularly loses my balance, and I'm a hiker, a long-distance hiker, we are. And I now walk with a tentative stride, and I've just started using a stick on a regular basis. I'm a reader who struggles to remember what I just read, and I'm a foodie who has a hard time ordering from a menu. I'm a seasoned traveler who now gets anxious in airports, and I have been an almost lifelong urban dweller who gets overwhelmed with urban living. And I am an extrovert, probably the biggest extrovert you will ever meet, who gets overwhelmed walking into a room, a party. Early onset dementia is literally robbing me of a lot of the strengths that I valued all these years. And while I might not show it, probably don't right now show it to you, in the words of Christine Bryden, this remarkable woman in Australia living with FTD, she says, and I feel most days like a swan gliding gracefully above the water and paddling frantically beneath the water in order to stay afloat. I have primary progressive aphasia, that is the loss of language, and it's getting harder for me to speak and to write. And what I've learned is that language is a three-step process. We have to decide what we want to say, we have to figure out how to say it, and then we have to actually go through the mechanical process of saying it. And when you're struggling to think, and to speak, and to write, the seemingly simple process that we all take for granted is exhausting. By the time I get to the third step, I'm often so tired or frustrated that I want to give up, or the conversation has moved on. And when I am really in a stressful situation, by the time I get to that third step, I find myself sometimes blurting out the word or shouting out the word, almost as if I'm kind of autistic in a strange sort of way. What I'm coming to realize is that almost everything we do, with the exception of those involuntary actions like breathing, is a three-step process. You have to decide what you want to do, you have to remember how to do it, and then you have to do it. And most of us we take it so for granted that we think we can multitask and do a whole bunch of things at one time. But as you're losing your cognitive abilities, that goes away. And you can only do one thing at a time, and it becomes increasingly hard to do it. So people who are living with dementia, especially in the early phases of it, often, like me, get anxious and tentative, afraid that we'll forget something important, that we won't recognize somebody we know, or that we'll get overwhelmed by our environment or the task at hand. Anxiety is a really powerful undercurrent of this disease. And people with cognitive impairment often live on the edge of panic. But as I adjust to living with it, and as we together develop coping strategies, it's actually a little easier than it was 2 years ago. For instance, I've curtailed the number of activities and conversations during the day. I manage how much I do and how much I talk. Thanks to speech therapy, I've learned descriptive workarounds for when I can't recall a word. My favorite word in the whole wide world these days is thing. It's that thing that does whatever I want it to do, right? Because I usually can't find the word anymore. Sometimes my sentences get really short, and I'm just learning how to accept that. With the help of a physical therapist, I learned how to prevent falls, or at least manage my falling. I've organized my closet into a very fashionable capsule wardrobe, so that everything I see goes with everything I see. And even then, it still might take me all morning to decide which white shirt to wear. It's really quite ridiculous. When we go out to a restaurant, we look at the menu, if possible, in advance, and I slowly decide what I'm going to eat by process of elimination of what I don't want to eat. And when we get there, we ask for a quiet table, And Emily reminds me of what I want to order. You know what comes next is that damn early bird special. And recently we made a decision to move to a quieter neighborhood so that I don't have to manage noise as much. One of the realities of dementia is as it progresses, your world does get smaller and your realm of decision making becomes more limited. So I can manage my life, but I can't manage anybody else's. I can still drive, but I'm not driving very much, and I know there will come a time when I give that up, and I want to tell you, I'm going to decide that before it's taken away from me. I want to stay home as long as possible, and we're making a lot of accommodations for that, but there might come a time where I've got to go into assisted living, and again, I hope and pray that I won't be resistant and obnoxious about it. But, you know, while I'm no longer the captain of my life in the way I used to be, there's places to sit.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
I'm discovering that there's this freedom in not being in charge. There's a relief in not having to make so many decisions, and there's a joy as I watch others take the helm. So I call that the lesson of no longer the captain. One of the other spiritual lessons that I'm learning is, I call it the way of the child. Do you remember that 1990s movie Regarding Henry, starring Harrison Ford, who is a high-powered lawyer who gets shot in the head, and it leaves him with brain disease, and his life upside down, his career destroyed, but the spirit, the gentle spirit of a child. And that's how I feel most days. I'm in this aging body with a mind that is declining, and yet a spirit that is becoming younger. For instance, I ride my bike with great enthusiasm, and I sometimes like to pretend I'm on a horse. I'm sure I'd really pretend that if I lived out here. I explore art, not with the eye of a critic, but with the curiosity of a kid. I laugh at silly bathroom jokes. I cry at the drop of a dime. And I sometimes want my teddy bear. I have one. His name is Travel Bear. And there are these moments when I reach for Emily's hand or she takes mine. Not like that of a lover or a spouse, but like that of a child with a parent. I don't like it when it's happening, but it does. And yet Jesus said, truly I tell you, unless you become like children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. So I'm beginning to wonder, has dementia given me a shortcut? You know, Jesus and the great wisdom teachers all talk about dying to oneself and being born anew, right? I think that that's kind of what's happening with me with dementia. I have no doubt I'm losing the life I've always lost, but I'm also getting a new one. And when I acknowledge it, and when I'm good to my new self, it's a pretty okay place to be right now. And I start discovering different gifts and strengths and a new way of living and a new balance in the world. And I'm discovering that since I can't return to the past, and I can't predict or control the future, that I have to live in the here and the now. And I'm beginning to think that's why Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow is going to bring plenty of worries of its own. So Emily's going to talk to you a little bit, and then we'll take some questions and conversations. And we have till what time? When do we end?
10:15.
10:15. Perfect.
So, Tracy calls it dementia from the inside out, and I call it dementia from upside down because frontotemporal degeneration has turned my well-ordered life completely upside down. Every marriage has its assigned roles. I managed our life, our finances, our home. Tracy managed a cathedral and her own schedule. Tracy's job was to be the extrovert, the advocate, the connection maker, both at work and in our relationship. And my job was to facilitate all that. So she invited the whole wide world to dinner and I cooked for them. I hired the contractors, handymen, and house sitters, and she held their feet to the fire. She kept in touch with everyone she ever met, far and wide, and I made the travel arrangements to get us there. And I liked that. And then suddenly life changed, and I heard one of the titans of dementia doctors say, kindly, gently, but in essence, Tracy, you have a disease you've never heard of, there's no treatment, there's no cure, you're gonna have trouble speaking, and eventually you will become mute. Go home and get your affairs in order. So, Tracy, the communicator, will become mute, and Emely, the shy one, will have to step up and be the advocate and the social director. And my first thought, which still comes up on a regular basis, was we are totally screwed. So in the first couple of months, we were engulfed in details and in endings, and we abruptly left the context and the shape of our days with nothing really to replace it. And we were enmeshed in Social Security and pension disability and health insurance and advanced directives. And the details are formidable, as many of you know, and the system is designed to be confusing. So we had to shift gears really fast. And at this point in the narrative, Tracy's trajectory and mine went in different directions. Within 6 months from her diagnosis, Tracy was turning this pit spot into a pilgrimage. She quickly found meaning and purpose in it, but she's in the habit of looking for and finding God in odd places. My journey's different. I'm in the habit of worrying and nattering on at God about things, and all the while that Tracy was finding purpose and pilgrimage, I was praying, please just get me through this train wreck. It took me a solid year to work through my own grief and anger and fright. And so the grace of our situation and the deep love of God and the joy within our new life really eluded me for quite some time. You see, my journey began from a perspective of loss. Loss of community, loss of dreams and goals for the future, loss of freedom to traverse the world in the ways that we used to do, loss of a basic groundedness. I felt like not the rug, but the whole floor had been pulled out from under me. So many of you know the Kubler-Ross stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. We went through those like a washing machine, but mine got stuck on the anger cycle. I was furious, and sometimes I still am furious. And the more Tracy got her act together, the angrier I became, and she would say, where's the grace of God in this? And I would think, he beats the crap out of me, where's God? I grieved long and hard, and I grieved for plans and bucket list items that are no longer feasible. I grieved in anticipatory grief of the long goodbye and the unfairness of it all. In my scenario for our future, I had always envisioned a big front porch and a tree-lined street down which two old ladies would walk hand in hand, and the neighbors would look out and say, there go the girls today. My scenario did not include running mental interference as we walk today, scanning for potentially loud noises like lawnmowers and garbage trucks, or people coming up behind us minding their own business, who might cause Tracy to jump out of her skin because her sense of hearing is hypertuned and her peripheral awareness is diminished. My scenario did not include becoming a parent to my spouse before I turned 60. But over time, my perspective shifted. After the first couple of months, my prayer changed a tiny bit, and it went from that silent scream to, please help me walk this path with grace and courage, with patience and competence, and all those qualities that I will need and have no idea whether or not they're in me. And so I made a point of asking other care partners and of discerning within myself what skills and qualities I already bring to the journey. Shortly after my prayer changed, I met a woman who had recently retired from a career working in dementia care. And she's been helpful to me with specific coping strategies for the bad days, but more importantly with gaining perspective on the good days and on the whole journey. She's helped me see that our work, the care partners, is to look up and around whenever we can. Our work is to try to alleviate the suffering on the bad days and to preserve the moments of joy on the good ones. Dementia requires you to live in the space and in the moment. It requires the whole family to live in the space and in the moment. And many of those moments are funny and beautiful and strong. FTD is changing our relationship, not overnight, but not all at once, but bit by bit, this person I dearly love is morphing into someone else. This woman who has spent her entire life walking the walk, with teenagers in the South Bronx, commercial sex workers in Cleveland and Patterson, homeless people, bearding the homophobic lion, speaking truth in love to power. This woman who has built vibrant, empowered faith communities and pushed the boundaries on the streets, in the church, and in the boardroom, now comes completely unraveled in the TSA line at the airport. It happens in little tiny heartbreaking moments. One day she can't organize the steps to a recipe that she perfected 20 years ago. And a week later she doesn't remember that we had lunch an hour ago with her best and oldest friends. And those moments just sneak up on us, and we realize that our life together isn't what it was. But her embedded memory, her strategic thinking, her wisdom is still alive and well. She's always been more self-aware than anyone I ever met, and she's aware of and able to describe her dementia, how it changes things, how it alters her perceptions. And I'm such a nerd, I find that interesting. We haven't figured it all out, and just when we think we have, something shifts, and we have to stop and reassess our strategy. But our relationship is stronger than it's ever been, and each day is a gift. Some days are like they've always been, full of love and laughter and life's everyday annoyances. Tracy gets tired sooner, and she walks more slowly, which means that I can keep up with her. I can enjoy her company and smell the flowers. And friends, some of them people I never thought would be there, have come out of nowhere with generous, practical help. And so my prayer shifted again, and it's still, please help me walk this path with grace and courage and competence. But now it also includes thank you. Thank you for those funny, beautiful moments and for reminding me to notice and appreciate them. Since that terrible day in November 2016, I have achieved a hard-won zen of it is what it is. And although I'd like to take this disease and beat it to a pulp, I have to take it as it comes. I have to pay attention to right here and right now. There are a number of things that used to derail me, but they just don't matter anymore, and that's very freeing. We live an amazing life. We travel the world, and with every trip comes laughter and new and old friends and new wisdom. And yeah, my heart is broken, but God is very much walking by my side, and God's light is bright and loving. And so to paraphrase Ram Dass after he had his stroke, I don't wish this disease on you or on anyone you love, but I do wish you the grace of it, because there are surprising gifts in dementia.
So people often say to me, Tracy, you don't seem like you have dementia. And I bet some of you are thinking that today. But what does that mean? That a person with dementia is wandering around a memory unit with cookie crumbs on a shirt that doesn't match your pants, wearing adult diapers, holding a stuffed toy, staring into space or at a television set, and maybe babbling or moaning or talking nonsense, right? That's what we think about when we think about dementia. And that's not me, and that's not any of the other folks that I've met in the mild to moderate stages, but I think it's that stereotype is part of what keeps us from admitting that we're having a problem and asking for help. Some days I feel like my old self, and I question the diagnosis, and that's part of the early stages of this condition. But then something happens, like I might get disoriented in a crowd, or frightened in an airport, or startled on a sidewalk. Or I might start stuttering really badly, or blurting out, or shouting incorrect words or incomplete sentences. I might forget to brush my teeth or take my medicine. We have that thing on the mirror that tells me all the things I'm supposed to do in the morning, right? I might become immobilized by choices and decisions, or forget how to do a simple task. I might even have a tantrum in public, or burst into tears for no good reason, or, and this has happened, help myself to food off of a stranger's plate on an airplane. Not too long ago, I was flying home from somewhere, and I was sitting there, and I was like reading my iPad or watching television or something, and I leaned over to the person next to me and started drinking their drink, and then I got upset because it wasn't something I liked. And I said, why did you get this? This woman who I'd never seen in my life was me like, okay. And I said, and do you have some snacks? Can I have some of your snacks? And she's like, okay. Unfortunately, I realized, I thought it was Emily, I think. I realized I didn't know this person. And I realized what I had done. And here's the difference. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I have a kind of dementia, and I just got confused. Will you please accept my apologies? She was really gracious. We had a lovely conversation. She'll probably remember me if she sees me again. Probably run the other direction. And I probably won't recall her name or her face. But it's those kind of moments that sort of remind me, yeah, I've got this problem. And I've learned that denial is a very common issue because it's such a devastating diagnosis. Dementia is what adults fear about aging more than anything else. Studies have shown that. How many of you are more afraid of being mentally, cognitively impaired than physically impaired as you age? It's just, it is what it is. To not be in control of your brain is a very frightening perspective. And so what happens is that people want to offer comfort by saying things like, we all forget our best friend's last name, or we all can't remember where we placed our keys. And that's true. If we're distracted, we forget stuff. That's true. Our brains are not as elastic as we get older. That's true. But when you begin to add it all up, dementia is not normal aging. 1 in 10 over the age of 65, 1 in 3 over the age of 80. But I'm a 92-year-old father-in-law, Emily's dad, who's sharp as a tack. He's not going to die with dementia. But people want to offer comfort, so they say it's okay. And I want to say that's not helpful. It's not helpful because it reinforces a cycle of denial and doubt. And acceptance is, I think, the single most difficult but critical aspect of managing a life with cognitive impairment. And I want to leave you with that thought today, that the reality is the truth will set you free if you're willing to be truthful. Do you want to say a little bit about that, Em?
So care partners tend to feel that we experience dementia alone because there's symptoms at home that the community will never see. So please don't think that the care partner is making it up or exaggerating when she tells you what's going on. One person said to me, please believe us when we tell you unbelievable things. Because you may have had a really lovely conversation with that person and maybe it seemed totally fine. Maybe he was searching for a word or forgot a name or something, but we all do that. And on one hand, we're glad that our loved one can pull it together in public and be just like old times. But on the other hand, We would like you to understand that it isn't always like that at home. Just a few hours ago, that same person may have been curled up in a fetal ball, sobbing because she's afraid she put on the wrong shoes. There may be a padlock on the refrigerator because he can't stop eating. He may refuse to shower for days on end. And on the way to see you, she may have run through the subway station crying and clutching her teddy bear. But kind of the amazing grace about this disease is that the person with dementia never remembers these incidents. Tracy might vaguely recall that she was uncomfortable or anxious in a situation, but afterward, so after her brain hits the reset button and she's returned to equilibrium, she will not be embarrassed that she fell apart because she has no memory of it. And I wish I could say the same for myself. Care partners need the love and support of friends and community as much as their loved ones with dementia do. I've talked with people who have walked this journey all the way to the end, and several of them have said that without their church community, they could not have made it. And unfortunately, an equal number have said that after an initial flurry of interest, everybody disappeared. Dementia is a long, long, lonesome battle, and it lasts for years, and we need companions walking with us every step of the way.
You know, as dementia runs its course, people do end up with walkers and wheelchairs, and eventually confined to bed. The system really does shut down. That's how people die with dementia. It's you don't die of dementia, you die with dementia. And it really becomes a failure to thrive. And in some instances, in particular with FTD, the kind I have, it's the inability to swallow. And so you really kind of stop eating and drinking. And you become very reliant on the kindness of others, including strangers. And that's the frightening prospect for me. It's being confined to bed, unable to communicate, dependent on others, and isolated. If I fear anything, I fear isolation. And I also fear having others impose their stuff on me. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm making a list of the music and the films and the poetry and food and flowers and clothing and television shows and daily routines that I enjoy, so that when I'm not able to communicate, my caregivers at that stage will know my personal tastes and won't impose theirs. I don't want to watch Fox News. Please, give me NPR, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to Bing Crosby. I want to listen to Bruce Springsteen. I don't want to watch Breakfast at Tiffany's. I want to see The Big Chill, and so on and so forth. And while your doctors and lawyers are not going to say this to you, I think that I call it the playlist of your life, and we're about to post it on our website called interruptedbygod, tracylin.com. I think that playlist is as important as my living will and my healthcare power of attorney. You know, one of the challenges for people living with all kinds of dementia is that we lose the ability to tell our stories and advocate on our own behalf, and that's why we're doing this. For as long as we're able, we're going to tell the story out loud so we can destigmatize it, we can educate people, and we can support the church as we grow older. No matter how much we try to attract those millennials, and boy did I spend a lot of energy doing that over the course of my ministry, the reality is the Episcopal Church is getting older, which means we're going to see a lot more dementia in our midst, and we need to be able to talk about it with one another and support each other as we live with it. So we're going to stop, and we have about, that clock is right, we have about 20 minutes for questions and conversation, whatever is on your mind, or we can just visit and have coffee. Yes, sir.
Well, I had an experience with dementia. I've done some volunteer caregiving. I'm not officially a caregiver, but I've done it here at the church. And I was helping this lady I won't mention her name. When we first started, she just needed rides. I'd give her a ride to church, and she was perfectly, with it mentally. I'd have to take her shopping, but I could just pull into the shop, pull into the shopping center and park in normal Park Street to walk in the shop. Then gradually she got weaker, and I could deal with that. And I had to park right by the door, and then go park and come back because she couldn't walk from a regular parking space. Then she began to go off the deep end. She got to mention, we'd go shopping, and she'd say, "I want milk." Well, we already got right with her cart. Every 5 minutes, did we get the milk? And then pretty soon she had cats, and we had to get, we needed to get cat food. But like if she wanted Friskies, cheese and turkey, we had to get exactly that. It couldn't be some other brand of cheese and turkey, or Friskies, something else, If we had to go to 3 different stores, spend 2 hours, that was fine with her. Finally, then they started, if I refused to do it, she started yelling and screaming at me. And finally, I just told the minister, I just can't deal with this anymore. I can deal with physical handicaps, but I can't deal with that. She just made it so miserable for me that I just told the minister, I'm just not going to do this anymore.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. First thing is, I have noticed in me that I am becoming increasingly OCD. What does that stand for? Obsessive compulsive disorder, right? And that OCD is manifest in I want the same brand of toothpaste. Don't ask me to get a different kind of brand.
Well, it's kind of like that.
So part of that, I think, and I want everything where I put it. And I think part of that is that it's because I'm afraid of forgetting where it actually is, that I am trying to keep my life ordered as my brain becomes scattered. So that's one thing to remember about dementia. And in the early days, you're still working hard at it. And you're also having good moments and bad moments in the early days. We call it FTD days. I had one last week. It was just horrific. I can't tell you any of the details about it, but I know it was a really bad day. And today, I feel fine, right? It comes and it goes. So that's one thing. Secondly, is asking to do, did I get the milk? Did I get the milk? Did I get the milk? That is the loss of short-term memory, and as dementia increases, as dementia progresses, the short-term memory cycle becomes more and more short, so that it gets harder and harder to hold on to what just happened. It's hard for me to look at the phone number and then dial it. I have a very hard time doing that. It's written down, but it's just hard for me to do this. Eventually, I won't be able to read those numbers, or they won't make sense. The yelling is frustration. It's the inability to communicate what you need to communicate. So you find yourself yelling, and she's not really yelling at you. She's yelling at the world. Now, not everybody can cope with that.
I got the point that I couldn't. I think the last time she said her cell phone didn't. Something was wrong with her cell phone. And all you have to do is push that button. And then she screamed and yelled, "That's not right. That's not right." She made her take me to Radio Shack, and it was a significant pain in the neck. And then the man told her exactly what I told her. She said, "Oh, okay."
So, how many of you been to church already this morning? Okay, the lesson this morning is from Paul's letter to the church in Corinth, and he says there are many gifts and many activities, many services, many ministries, but it's all the same God. You might not be called to support somebody as their dementia progresses.
Well, I didn't have any problem with physical. I had another fellow that I supported quite a while.
Right.
His mind was fine. He had to use a wheelchair.
Right, so that might not be your ministry. But it might be Sandra's. She might not have any problem doing it because Sandra understands that it's her gift. It might not be your gift.
No, apparently it wasn't. Now, I dealt with it quite a while financially.
Yeah.
Another thing, of course, she was constantly expecting me to pay for things.
Well, she's probably not really expecting it. She's just not coping. So, Sandra.
I have a question for Emily. when you're out and about, and she has an episode of anxiety, do you find it helpful to explain to people, say she's dealing with early onset, or say, she's having a bad day due to this FTD, or
Sometimes, but most of at the moment, most of the time when Tracy falls apart, there aren't other people around. But there have been times, sometimes, well, a good example is the airport. I will go up to the people at the desk at the gate and say, I've got someone with me who has dementia, can we go on with the wheelchairs and everybody else? And that helps the flight crew be really accommodating for the entire flight.
Do they know it?
Yes. Oh, yeah. That part goes down.
you got always treated well just because it was you. You didn't know that she'd gone through it.
Yeah, no, but they'll often be right there helping and turn your seat, and you're all set and settled. And before they let the rest of the plane load. So that when it's helpful, when I need other people to facilitate something, absolutely.
And she has my permission to say it out loud. I am not ashamed of this. If I had a broken leg, I'd board the plane, right? If I had cancer or diabetes or heart condition, I wouldn't hide it. Why do we hide brain disease? Because we've been taught that it's something to be ashamed of. It's like HIV/AIDS. We were taught it was something to be ashamed of. You did something wrong to get it. Well, guess what? You didn't do something wrong to get it, and I haven't done anything wrong to get this. So I'm not ashamed, and if I'm open about it, it's going to help Emily deal with it. Yes?
Can I ask you to relate
Sure.
Alzheimer's to dementia?
Okay, that's a great question. Dementia is a broad category of behaviors and challenges, symptoms. It's an umbrella term for the condition that's caused by various forms of brain disease, brain deterioration. Alzheimer's, Lewy body, AIDS-related, FTD, vascular, are all forms of dementia. They're all the diseases that cause the dementia. The dementia is the behavior. So when I say I have early stage dementia, they start with cognitive impairment, mild cognitive impairment. You've heard that phrase, MCI. And that just really means it's really early and they're not sure what's causing it. And nobody knows for certain what causes dementia until after death. Because they can do scans, but until you can open up the brain and really look at it, you don't know. And they don't do that to our brains, thank God. So Alzheimer's is a disease that causes dementia, or it's a form of dementia. Yes, sir.
I want to ask Emily a question, and that is, having been a caregiver myself, I know that caregivers need a lot of support. What do you do? How do you do that?
So a number of things. I mean, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So I don't do that as well as I should. But diet, exercise, stress reduction. But also just making sure I'm in touch with my friends. That there are a number of online and in-person support groups. That there's one for spouses of people with FTD that's online. And then there are the Alzheimer's associations all over the country have any flavor of support group you could possibly want. And I'm told and I believe that the people who get through this journey the best, as best they can, are the ones who avail themselves of the support groups. And I believe that. I've found that the first one was really scary, and I went to that, and it took me a lot of guts just to go. But then when I got there, everybody else there, they were way farther down the road on this than we are, and it was terrifying. And I remember I left that group, and I went out to the car, and I drove about 100 yards down the road and pulled into a parking lot and just sobbed for a good hour. But I made myself go back another time, and yeah, they are farther down the road, but they have real practical advice of, you know, here's this something that happened, well, here's what I did that worked, and here's what I did, don't try that. And those are, so that's, I think the support groups are the most important thing.
Well, you also talk about the importance of people like in your church community asking after Emely. I'm just using Emely as the example. As people, when their dementia progresses, offering to come and sit with me, or take me to the movies, or take me out for a walk so that Emely can have time to herself. Maybe even offering to go and sit so that she can go to church eventually. Offering to help with household chores, you know, things like that can be helpful.
What were some of the things that helped for you?
I'll tell you, I really needed support groups. I really did. I've taken care of poor people who died, and
Okay.
friends were really important. I did some group therapy too.
I want to thank you for sharing your experiences because, in my opinion, ignorance is what keeps everyone in the dark.
Yeah.
And just like the AIDS epidemic and everything, when it finally came out, the fear went away, and the understanding came into play, and the isolation started to go away as well. And I have a personal experience. I have a friend that's going through it now herself, and to hear you as the caregiver on your side, it's really important for me to always want to call her and ask her how she's doing, and of course her wife Myrna as well. And so for me, today was really a good experience, because if folks like yourselves are not going out and educating the community about this, and that it really isn't something to be afraid of, but it's something that we need to embrace because it's inevitable. As you mentioned, a certain percentage of people are going to get it anyway. So why avoid it? Why not understand it? So that when someone has an episode, we don't get afraid and run away. We understand it. So thank you.
I think one of the things that people can do to help, call up your friend and just talk about something normal. You know, not even just how are you and how are you coping with dementia, but I went to a baseball game today, and just normal stuff, because their lives are not normal anymore.
What's the phrase you really hate? This is something you shouldn't do.
The phrase I really hate is, how are you really? How are you really? There's a voyeuristic thing going on there.
Not what you're telling to the rest of the world, but tell me.
Yeah.
Other comments or thoughts? Hold on, let's just get everybody, get a chance. Robert.
I just want to add my own thank you. You two have lived your lives in such an earthy, authentic, gritty way, and you're doing it in exactly the same way in this unexpected turn in your lives. So thank you for that. You've also got a huge audience coming up. You were just filmed by 60 Minutes. Could you both say a little about that without maybe giving away what people will see on the show?
We don't know what people will see.
Yeah, we don't know. In fact, I'm very nervous about it. First, Robert and Jerry, who are members of this wonderful congregation, are why and how we are here today. So I'm grateful for that. They're our hosts. Robert is on this. I guess I'll say it in the sermon. Part of the playlist of my life includes a list of friends who have promised that they'll be there for the long run of this. And I'm really counting on that. We're in the process of remodeling an old house in Cleveland with two guest suites, because there's gonna come a time where I can't run around, and I'm really counting on my friends to come. And when I can't talk, to read to me or watch TV with me or just sit with me so that I'm not all alone. We have been approached by, not approached, just beyond that now. We have spent the last week with 60 Minutes. Last Sunday, they filmed us preaching and teaching at All Saints Episcopal Church in Beverly Hills. And then last week we went to San Francisco, where we were interviewed for 4.5 hours about this. And it's really about FTD, about frontotemporal degeneration, so that people can understand this rare disease, but a disease that more people have it at any given time. 40 to 60,000 Americans will have FTD, and that's more than people than ALS, and yet people don't know about it. And so we did open our lives to them. I'm a little nervous about how much we opened, and actually sharing some video of when I'm not doing well, which is even harder to do, because as Emely says, I can still keep it together in public. And so, because it's not every day, I'm working hard every day to keep it together, and I think what happens is when I'm with her, my defense mechanisms go away. And so she's been doing a little bit of filming of that. So I'm not sure what we're going to see on 60 Minutes.
We're not the only ones that they're filming, though. They're filming at least one, maybe two other families, and then one of the rock star researchers. So we might be 30 seconds out of 15 minutes, or we might be more than that.
We'll see.
We'll just have to see.
We'll see. It
And
comes
it's
on.
going to air sometime in the spring. Is all we'll say.
We learned 60 Minutes does not ever announce their shows until a week or two before airing, because they need to be current. Do you know it's in its 51st year?
60 Minutes.
Sir, somebody else had a question or comment or thought.
Maybe just quick,
No, thank you.
listening to, is there ever a sense that in the anticipation of one of those FTD days, that your brain sort of betrays you?
In anticipation of it.
You mentioned one of the days that you said it was a bad day.
Right, yeah.
It's like you're going along and it's like, when is it going to happen? Is there a sense?
I don't know. That's what's so hard.
Okay.
I will know when I wake up. I don't know whether it's I didn't get enough sleep that night, or whether it was something I ate, or whether I had overextended for a couple of days. But when it happens, it's like everything breaks down. I can't talk. I can't make decisions. I burst into tears. My legs start cramping. I mean, I take a lot of, I'm doing a lot of supplements and stuff to help with this, but they stop moving very well. And then I get caught off guard, and then I think it sort of spins, and then eventually it seems to reset, and I don't quite understand that. Some things help make it reset, but I don't quite get it. Okay, one last comment or thought, and we need to bring this to a close because I got to preach.
That's the term care partner.
Yeah, say more
I
about that.
love that term, care partner, because that's.
So your care partner, at some point in the advanced stages, there are caregivers, but care partners are the people who are walking along with you
Through the journey.
through the journey.
I think on that, we're gonna have to let that be the last word. Emily can stick around for a few minutes and talk some more with you. I need to excuse myself, but again, you can follow our blog, you can subscribe to it, and when we publish a new thought or a new piece, it'll be in there. And when we're gonna be on 60 Minutes, I'm sure we'll be able to announce it there. But thank you for having me here, and
Thank you.
please,
Thank you.
if you're worried, go talk to your doctor.